I'm Michael Marzouk, co-founder of Early Warning Labs. I'll go a little bit, this is going to be less of a, probably not a sales pitch and more of a introduction into earthquake early warning systems and how cities and hospitals and school districts can prepare for an earthquake and what an early warning system should look like. So that's going to be the goal of this presentation. If I accidentally mention a couple things about our company, I'm not trying to sell you a product. So just a heads up. All right. So a little bit about us. Our research began in 2013 to meet the particular needs of the USGS, and the company was formed a little bit shortly thereafter. We are the only company with a USGS government partnership. With that, it's a cooperative research and development agreement, and with that, we have a relationship where we have access to all the raw seismic data, and with that, we are helping develop a standard for being able to deliver, developing a standard for earthquake early warnings for hospitals and school districts. An example being, if you have a mall, you don't want to broadcast that an earthquake is coming and then create mass hysteria. So because of that, we're trying to develop kind of a standard to see what is the best course of action to deliver a warning to the mass public without creating more problems than already are going to be present. We have integrated software and hardware, national sales. The company founder, so Josh, his background is a CERT trainer, emergency management, disaster preparedness, did a lot for the studios. My background was public safety communications, Southern California APCO, mass notification systems, 911 dispatch systems, and interoperability systems. So this kind of gives you an idea that we're both coming, the company was formed in a way to get to a point where we have the entire suite covered. Everything from the public safety communications aspect and from the disaster preparedness end user aspect. So we've tried to bridge those two together in forming this kind of presentation. So a little bit about earthquake basics. Try to stand over here. So you'll notice over here, the epicenter of the earthquake usually happens along a fault line. When an earthquake happens, you have two waves that go out. You have the first wave, which is the P wave. Then you have the second wave, which is the S wave. That's the shaking wave. That is the one that's going to cause a lot of the damage. So the USGS currently has several hundred sensors, those little black dots, they're sensors, several hundred sensors up and down the coast. Huge amount of them around California, in California. What happens is, with the earthquake early warning system that the USGS, Caltech, and Berkeley have developed, when the P wave propagates out from the epicenter, it has to hit three sensors. Once it hits those three sensors, that information gets sent to the earthquake alert center. So why three sensors? Three sensors because if a big truck rolls by one sensor, you don't want to set off a false alarm. A sensor is similar to a computer. It can be outdated, it can malfunction, etc. So you don't want to rely on one sensor. Three sensors gives us accurate data and tells us exactly where the epicenter is, what the magnitude is, and will tell us how it's going to propagate. USGS has partnered up with ESRI, that does GIS mapping. What the GIS mapping does is it helps us learn how the earthquake is going to propagate through the ground with varying soil densities, mountainous regions, etc. So the USGS is using something called the Mercalli scale. The Mercalli scale is based on a 1 to 12 scale of intensity. The magnitude of an earthquake is always the same because it's what the shaking was at the epicenter. So the magnitude of a 6.0 for Napa wasn't a 6.0 in San Francisco. The earthquake itself is a 6.0, but the intensity may have been a 7 or an 8 in Napa, and as it propagated away from the epicenter, it slowly loses steam. So San Francisco may have been hit with an intensity of a 4 or a 5, or maybe a 3. So what the system does is it will tell you exactly what the intensity is going to be at your exact GPS location. And that's going to determine a lot of things. The first being, you don't want, say for a school district, if an earthquake happens 50 miles away, you will get approximately a 40-second warning that an earthquake is happening, because the sensors are detecting the earthquake really close to the epicenter. It's being sent to the Earthquake Alert Center, and then that's all in cloud storage at this point, and then that can disseminate the information directly to the mass public. Now, we're traveling at the speed of light, whereas the earthquake is traveling at the speed of sound. A lot of people don't know this, but earthquakes travel through the ground at the same rate that sound waves travel through air. So we're talking, what, 280 meters per second, give or take, through the ground, whereas speed of light is significantly faster. So, any questions on the slide? No? Okay. So I have a little video I want to show you guys. This is based off San Andreas Fault, what would happen if there was an earthquake in Southern California. Kind of gives you an idea of what the infrastructure will look like afterwards.
It's a sunny morning in Southern California. Across the region, 7.5 million people are busy at work. Several 100,000 of them are commuting to jobs in different counties, far from where they live. Over 200,000 commuters work and reside on opposite sides of the San Andreas Fault. Today, these families and many others across the region will be separated. 1,800 people will die. 53,000 people will be injured. And $213 billion in damage will occur. It's 10 a.m. The largest earthquake to hit Southern California in modern times has just begun. Some people react appropriately, others don't. In the intense shaking, nearly 1,500 buildings collapsed. Infrastructure is severely compromised, and 300,000 buildings suffer significant damage. The rupture travels 200 miles northwest along the San Andreas Fault, violent shaking lasting as long as 2 minutes in some areas. Finally, the earthquake is over. Many of the lifelines of Southern California have been disrupted. A large number of people are trapped in collapsed buildings. Over 1,600 fires started, some turning into super conflagrations. Millions of people are trying to use their phones, causing the system to become overloaded. In the months ahead, there will be tens of thousands of aftershocks. Residents will struggle to recover from the earthquake. There will be no water for weeks or months, and no electricity. Traveling from point to point within the city will be extremely difficult, and 255,000 people will be displaced from their homes. We are all in this together. We will suffer the consequences if we don't do our part right now. How quickly life gets back to normal after this disaster is up to you and those around you.
Okay.
You have any brimstone that far?
Huh?
You have any brimstone that far?
Yeah, right. So why do I show this video? I show this video for a couple points. The first being that a lot of the deaths and injuries that are in this estimate are possibly avoidable with the simple tactic of informing people to duck, cover, and hold. A lot of deaths, a lot of injuries are going to result from people running out of the buildings or people not being in places that they should be, being underneath trains working, underneath forklifts. The warnings are getting even if it's as little as a 10-second warning, that makes a huge difference. But what does somebody do with that 10-second warning? So this is a picture of the current seismic activity across the country. There are quite a few more zones that are popping up, especially in areas of increased fracking. But because it's still within the margin of error, all the fracking states are considered, it's still a correlation and not a causation. So as we see more earthquakes hitting Kansas and Oklahoma, the tune might change a little bit. But this kind of gives you an idea. Obviously, we have more devastation on the West Coast and a lot higher concentration of faults on the West Coast. So, as I mentioned, about the very minimum that you can get is a 10-second warning. So I'll give you a little background story before I show this video. Our company developed an iOS app about last year, 2014. I guess we're in 2015 now. So early 2014, we developed an iOS app, and that's been featured on the news quite a bit. Well, Conan O'Brien decided to do a little skit about what could you do with a 10-second warning, realistically. So it's kind of a funny piece, so I thought I'd show that.
A company is developing a new app that will give users a 10-second warning before an earthquake. Yes. Now, the company making the app's been trying it out, and it's amazing to see what people can do with a 10-second earthquake warning. Take a look. Oh God! Oh God! Oh! Check your inboxes, everybody! This is who I am.
So kind of a nice fun piece. So here's the solution to the problem. So we've got huge concentration of seismic sensors up and down the California coast. LA has quite a bit of them. You can see San Francisco and the Bay Area has quite a bit of them. So the concentration is pretty solid on the sensors. So what do we do now that we have the sensors in place? So commercial distribution. There are three things that you kind of want to have in building a solution for all end users and for your public safety. One, all the information that's housed needs to be in the cloud. So you need an earthquake early warning alert cloud, some kind of server infrastructure. The USGS right now has data banks, but some of that is going to be shifted over to the early warning lab server cloud storage. So soon we'll be housing that information for the USGS. The other thing you want to have is some consumer products. One being something like the smartphone app. Smartphone app, an iOS app, an Android app that tells users that an earthquake is coming, and it lets them know exactly what the intensity is going to be by the time it hits the user. So if people are driving, if people are walking to class, if people are they're not at home, they're not at work. Possibly a consumer device, something that works inside their home. Something the equivalent of a smoke detector that's Wi-Fi enabled that will alert them if they're asleep. A lot of earthquakes happen in the middle of the 2 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning. So you want something that's going to be able to wake people up and notify them, whether it's a 10-second warning or a 30-second warning. And you want to be able to have some kind of commercial solution for your local public safety, your hospitals, your schools, your utility companies. A way to tie into PA systems, a way to tie into two-way radio infrastructure. So what does an automated response do? So with the USGS system, currently you can get between 10 seconds and say about a minute and a half of warning before an earthquake happens. So this differentiates from a local earthquake early warning system that just gets housed at your facility. The reason being that if, I'll go to the first slide, the difference between the P wave and the S wave is usually only about 8 seconds. So if you have a box that's sitting, say, at a hospital, and it detects P waves, that gives you an 8-second warning. What can you do with an 8-second warning if you can't automate anything with it? As the Conan O'Brien video showed, 8 seconds passes very quickly. You barely have enough time to react. You probably barely have enough time, even if you have an automated signal that goes out that says earthquake, 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 that's 5 or 6 seconds right there. Before somebody can analyze the information, understand the information, and react, the shaking's already begun. So this is where having automated hardware is very important. Taking the human element out of the equation so we can just continue operating at the speed of light. So what do we want this automated hardware to do? Doors, windows, gates, sirens, alarms, PAs, your backup generators for hospitals. You want to be able to tie into the on ports of a generator, kick it on 10 seconds, 20 seconds before the earthquake actually happens. So for hospitals, for example, their biggest liability is the surgeons. Surgeons have an open body in front of them, they're operating. If they don't get a warning that an earthquake is happening, they could be cutting something when the shaking starts. To boot, the power goes out. So now they may have nicked something and they can't see it. And there's 15, maybe 20 seconds of pitch dark until the backup generators kick on. Now here's the better part. The backup generators are usually diesel generators. Those things are very spiky. So when the power eventually does come back on, they've got half their cauterizers don't work because the cauterizers don't like the power killed and then coming back on with a surge. All of that can be avoided if they have something as simple as a 20-second, 30-second warning that an earthquake is coming. Cover up the body, stabilize the patient. The generators are already on before the earthquake even hits, so there's no loss of power. Schools, simple PA system. Tie into the PA system for the school or for the fire department, for the hospitals. Let them know that an earthquake is coming. For the schools, send a customized alert to the different classrooms. Duck, cover, hold. Very simple, like an earthquake drill or a fire drill. Simple duck, cover, and hold. No creating mass hysteria, abiding by the standards that the USGS sets. Simple messages like duck, cover, and hold can save hundreds of lives in a huge earthquake. Refineries, nuclear reactors, shutting those down. We saw what happened in Japan. Japan actually has an earthquake early warning system. It's actually a pretty robust one, but they don't have any automation tied to it. Automation makes a huge difference in saving lives and being able to even shutting down the most risky elements. Stopping elevators at the closest floor or tying into the elevator recall. All elevators have a recall. Tie into the recall port and you've got 10 seconds, you've got 30 seconds, hit the recall button. Let that elevator come to the first floor. How many lives are saved if an earthquake isn't if an elevator isn't 20 stories up and you've got a magnitude 6.0 shaking? You can slow down and stop the trains. We saw that with BART. When the Napa quake struck, BART actually has the USGS shake alert system. They were able to slow down the trains from 40 to 0 in the 8-second warning that they got. And they slowed the trains down at the same speed at which they stop at a normal stop. So it wasn't like they slapped on the brakes. So there's a lot of advantages to what you can do. Amtrak, BNSF, Union Pacific, those trains are traveling 80, 90 miles an hour. What happens when you have a 10-second warning, a 20-second warning, a 30-second warning? If you can even slow those trains down from 70 to 40 or from 70 to 20, the risk of derailment goes down exponentially. And all that's important. How many lives are saved? So what do you want the system to do? A commercial solution should be able to tie into any radio manufacturer. It needs to be interoperable. It needs to be able to tie into all your Motorola's, your Kenwood, your Tate, your Army Syncars radios. It needs to be a completely interoperable system. With that, it needs to tie into all of your dispatch systems. Whether you've got Motorola or Zetron, Telex, Avtec, whatever you have, it needs to be able to tie in. It needs to be able to send an alert over those systems. POTS phones, your Sprint Nextel, your VoIP phones, anything else that you can imagine, whether it's a relay or a communications device. It needs to be able to trigger sirens, alarms, and PA systems. I think Federal Signal has, I don't know how many hundreds of sirens and alarms and tsunami warning systems up and down the California coast. We should be able to tie into those. We can, by the way. Shameless plug, but we can. So first beta case study. Early Warning Labs did one of our first beta studies was at Universal Studios in Hollywood. And this is where a lot of the press started, and the USGS wanted a sample system to see how we can commercialize the alerts. So with Universal Studios, they have their fire station doors are opening, broadcast over the two-way radio system. They have a Moto Turbo system. So you definitely want your system to be frequency agnostic, radio agnostic. Alert over the PA system for the security and alert over the PA system for the fire department. You can see the phase two. The phase two, they want ride safety shut down and utility shut off and generators. But just to get started, notifying the people, notifying the security office so they can get prepared, notifying your disaster preparedness coordinators so they can get prepared, get to where they need to be. Alert over the PA systems for the security, alert over the PA systems for the firemen, wake them up, let them know that an earthquake's happening. The reason for opening up the fire doors, during the '94 Northridge quake, several of the utility companies, their doors were jammed shut. It took them 3 hours to get the utility trucks out so they can go back and come out and repair water and electrical lines. So what have we learned? Something as trivial as opening up a door can make the difference between hundreds of billions of dollars of damage. I talked to a couple of the firemen down in LA, and the question is posed, when an earthquake happens, how much of the damage is due to earthquake and how much of the damage is due to fire? And they say at least half. At least half the damage is due to fire and not having enough water to put out the fire, not having enough manpower to put out the fires. You got people looking for other people under the rubble. Sometimes that takes priority over putting out the fire. So it's all one giant ecosystem, and we need to bring the level of damage down, and there's several ways to do it. This just another tie into LA County Fire. So what kind of markets do you want to be able to tie into? You got to be able to tie into your public safety. You got to be able to tie into your schools, your utilities, your transportation, your hospitality. You got to be able to tie into your ambulance companies. They got to be aware. All ambulance companies got to be in the know. They got to be out there. They can't be stuck underground. Their paramedics vehicles can't be stuck inside garages. And that's where the hospitals really need to know. Major venues, malls, hotels, resorts, casinos, people where you've got a giant roof and you could have 2,000 people underneath one giant roof. Stadiums. And then, of course, military, because they're important. So this entire system was kind of developed between USGS, Caltech, and Berkeley. Development support came from Esri, and Microsoft and IBM have kind of joined in to provide the cloud storage for all of this information. So you could see there's a lot of big backers in this system, and the system is picking up a lot more steam. Was it 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, government approved $5 million for USGS? Well, the USGS needs, I believe it's 16 point something million dollars per year to upgrade and maintain the existing seismic network. So they need something like $50 or $60 million over 5 years, nationwide. That's it. The Napa quake by itself, the 6.0 Napa quake in Napa, cost somewhere close to $200 million in damage. For the entire country, we're talking $50 or $60 million for tying in the entire existing seismic networks and upgrading and maintaining all of it for 5 years. So it's a very trivial amount considering the amount of risk and the amount of damage that can result by not having it. So the system's been, Early Warning Labs has been featured, but the USGS, a lot of it's been in LA Times, at NBC. So the system is working, and it's been getting a lot of press, and I meant to take the slide out, so this isn't supposed to be a shameless plug, but the system has been out for quite a while. It's been tested, it works, but it needs government funding. So in summary, what do you need to do to develop a system? You need to take your communication system into account, your alerting system into account, and you need to be able to automate everything. For some of the higher risk things like, say, a nuclear reactor, I would probably want some human intervention there. Maybe tell the EOC that an earthquake is coming and have somebody sitting in the EOC hit the big red button. I probably may not want to hit that big red button myself, but I don't know too much about nuclear reactors, but that's just me. So, and I don't want to be near it either, so that's why I stay in LA and they have theirs in San Diego, So here's the final thought. It's not recommended to buy technology, but buy technology that fits your plan. So you want to have something that's very versatile. It needs to fit your operational plan, your communications plan, your frequency plan, your disaster plan, your emergency plan, your crisis plan. And a lot of how the system is going to work is developing a lot of these plans. We need to develop a standard for hospitals and school districts. So that's pretty much it. Questions? I try to keep it quick, so hopefully those. Yes?
One thing I forgot to announce when I was up talking about the sales group, Early Warning Labs, in collaboration with USGS, Caltech, and Berkeley, will be holding 2 one-hour panel discussion symposiums at the Western Regional Show in April. So there should be a lot of interest for a lot of people who want to get involved in this early warning system. You might want to talk about the technology that's out there now, and it's 10 years old.
Okay.
It's not connected to USGS.
So in the marketplace, there are 2 companies that do anything earthquake early warning related. There's us and there's one other company. The difference between the two, the system that's out there now that is being sold regularly is essentially a local sensor. It's one local sensor that gets put inside a facility. No automation, no announcements, but just a kind of like a box with a light and maybe an alarm that lets you know that an earthquake is coming. It detects the P waves and then lets you know that an S wave is coming. But what we've learned from that is that really just limits you to an 8-second warning, and that's it. Because it's all local, and a big part of that depends on how it's mounted. And that's why the USGS has kind of shifted to this kind of model where they want to be able to use all of the seismic sensors that are in the ground across the country. They want to be able to alert you if an earthquake is happening 80 miles off the coast. 80 miles off the coast, that could be, now you've got tsunami warning, you've got everything else. And that's what this system will be able to do. By having an automated system that can tie into your PA systems, you're not confined to just an earthquake warning. Now you can be alerted for a hurricane, tornado, any natural disaster. And that's kind of where the shift needs to go. And like I said, some of these systems already exist. Federal Signal put systems like this in, I think as far back as like the 1940s. So the systems do exist up and down the coast. We just have to tie into them and utilize them.
What is the operational area? For example, if we're talking Los Angeles, what's the radius that we would try to cover from LA?
So the sensors, you could see that the sensors are all up and down the California coast, and this is just California. So the sensors are actually, they span the entire country. You're not limited to a geographic area to getting an alert. The way that the system works is with the partnership with Esri and using the Mercalli scale, you can tell exactly how an earthquake is going to be losing steam or picking up steam as it disseminates away from the epicenter. So, for example, the San Andreas Fault in Southern California is about 80 to 90 miles from downtown LA. There's a solid 45 to 55 second warning to downtown LA before the shaking hits. And if it's an 8.0 at the fault, it might be it's using the Mercalli scale, it's an intensity scale, but it would be the equivalent magnitude of possibly a 6 or a 7. So you want to be able, so up here you have the Hayward fault. If you had a magnitude 5.0 at the Hayward fault, that you want to be able to alert San Francisco that you're getting an intensity of a 5 earthquake, whereas maybe Napa is getting equivalent of a 4 earthquake. And then you want to be able to set the protocols in your hardware to meet those intensity levels. Just because the magnitude of an earthquake is at 8.0, 80 miles away, doesn't mean that we need to have all hands on deck when by the time it hits us, we might not feel any shaking whatsoever. So, did I answer your question? Or?
Does the system automatically calibrate itself to say, okay, if it's an 8.0, we're going to be notifying people 100 miles away, or if it's 3.0, we're only going to notify people within a 30 or 40 mile radius?
Yeah, so his question is, give me your question one more time.
Well, does the system calibrate itself as far as
Okay.
how far away from the epicenter is it going to notify?
Yes. So his question is, does the system calibrate itself as the earthquake propagates out? And the answer is yes. As the earthquake is propagating out, it's hitting more and more sensors. So from the initial shaking, we already determine with our algorithms exactly what it's going to be when it hits here. So we can give you a time frame and an intensity level of what it's going to be by the time it hits the major city or wherever your GPS location is, whether you're 10 miles out, 20 miles out, 30 miles out, doesn't make a difference. We do it by minimal clusters of maybe a mile each. As the earthquake is propagating out, it's hitting more and more sensors. As it hits more and more sensors, it's recalibrating and running through the algorithm more and more. So now where we had maybe a 95, 96% accuracy rate by the time it hits the city, as it gets closer, we're getting closer to 99.9% accuracy. And even now, when an earthquake happens off the coast in Southern California, I get the alert on my phone, and I can literally see it count down, and as soon as it hits, I feel the light little shaking, my ceiling fan does a little wobble. So, yeah. I'll go you.
If you're, let's say the Hayward Fault,
Mm-hmm.
if you're in Hayward and an earthquake center on the Hayward Fault, will that P wave, will it really negate, I mean, will you really get any warning at all if you're that close within a couple of miles of?
So if you're sitting on top of the fault, you're considered in a blind zone. So most earthquakes happen, I want to say 5 to 7 miles underground, give or take. So you're probably talking 4 to 8 seconds before they hit the surface. So if you're sitting right on top of the epicenter, you're in a blind zone and you're kind of SOL, but yeah. But the benefit is that if you have an automation system, even as the earthquake starts ramping up, even if it's 2 seconds into the earthquake, 3 seconds into the earthquake, the automation can at least start kicking in and triggering whatever needs to be triggered before the earthquake really picks up steam and creates a lot of the damage. Ron?
So, having grown up in Southern California, experienced my first one in 71 was still Marzouk. I remember watching TV and seeing Keynote at the time, Jones, Caltech, and saying, gee, we wish we could predict these things, we wish we had the history and the technology at the time to be able to do that. We'll flash forward to it so much. And now we've got a lot of technology in place, warning system as it hits. Is there a development that takes history and pre-event activity to try and build together a better forecasting model that could give something more than 8 to 10 seconds advance alert?
So his question is, is there a forecasting model that can essentially predict an earthquake before it happens? And the answer is no. Everything that I have been told and educated and read says that no one can predict an earthquake. All of the information that is available is post-earthquake, pre-shaking. And that's why we have to stick with the automated system as of right now. I think University of Zurich is trying to work on something, but I think in the Great Shakeout video that I showed, it was saying that San Gabriel, a big earthquake hit San Gabriel once every 150 years. And it's been 300 years since our last major earthquake south of the San Gabriel Mountains. So with every year that passes, that percentage goes up that it's likely to happen in the next year. I think right now there's a 95% chance or something that it's happening in the next 30 years south of the San Gabriel Mountains. So that's about as good as we can do right now. But that's probably a USGS question. So, you should come to Western Regional APCO, and when USGS is there, they'll probably be able to answer that question a lot better than me.